This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by the great new book, The Great Maratini. The Great Maratini is a fun and touching story about Sam, a lovable but far from perfect magician. He's known throughout the land as a great Maratini. Now, despite his mini-stage mishaps, Sam never gives up on himself. And as a result of that grit and resolve, he's able to dazzle audiences with his amazing transformations. Sam also has a kind heart who can never walk away from anyone in need, and soon learns that the greatest transformation of all is transforming feelings of caring into action to help another human being. The Great Maratini is available now on Amazon, and you can read it for free on your Kindle by joining Kindle Unlimited. Check it all out at Amazon, The Great Maratini.
Reading with your kids.
Hey, hello, come on in. We are so happy you are here. My name is Jedley, and this is the very first episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're so excited about this podcast. We're really excited because, well, I'll be honest with you. If any of you remember my first podcast, the We Choose Respect Parentcast, you know how passionate I am about parents sitting down and reading with their kids, about parents getting down and experiencing all types of media with our kids, because media is so very prominent in our kids' life. It is so influential. It's everywhere. And we really need to help our kids become media literate. We need to help them understand who is creating this media that surrounds them. Why are they creating it? What is this media intending for your kids to do after they consume this media? And the best way to help our kids become informed adults, to really know, to really think about what it is that they're consuming or what it is that people want them to consume, is to begin by reading with our kids. It starts right there when your kid some people say it starts before the kids pop out of the womb. When you I used to do that myself. I'd read to my son and my daughter when they're sitting rolling around inside my beautiful wife. I have no idea how much they heard, but I imagine they experienced the love that my wife and I had for each other, and certainly the love that we had expecting these beautiful people to come into our lives. It starts it absolutely starts when the kid is with you right there the first day. That's a great time to start reading to your kid. And it is so very, very beneficial. And that's what we're here to do, to introduce you not only to great books through our book reviews that you'll be able to find on our website, readingwithyourkids.com, but also introduce you to great authors of great children's books, and authors of great books that will help you connect better with your kid. And we're also going to introduce you to great recipes and games and all sorts of things that you can do with your kids. Now, a really big thing that's very important that I want to just say up front. A lot of people envision reading with your kids as something you do with your babies, you know, when they're little, when they can fit on your lap and snuggle together. And that absolutely is important. But we should be reading with our kids forever. That's what I was talking about. You're experiencing media together. So we start by reading with our kids, reading to our kids. And then we start, we continue on when our kids can read, and we read with them so that they can read to us and improve their reading skills and really develop a love of reading. But then it continues when we sit down and we watch television with our kids, or watch movies with our kids, or watch videos on the internet, or play video games, or, read a book at the same time and then discuss it. It's just great ways to have conversations with our kids, really, really build that strong bond of love and that strong communication with our kids. So we have a great guest today. His name is Ronald Chapman. He is the author of a great book called My Name is Wonder. And Ronald's going to be in here in a minute. But first, we want to give a big shout out to one of our listeners out there. It's Peggy down in Stamford, Connecticut. She just welcomed a beautiful daughter into the world. She already has a beautiful son, Big O, such a great guy, and a beautiful, beautiful family, Peggy and her husband, Louis, and it's so happy that they're out there. We're really happy that they're part of this brand new Reading with Your Kids family, and we are really happy that you're with us too. Before Ronald comes in, we want to let you know about a great sponsor. It's Epic. What a perfect combination. What a great sponsor to have with the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Epic is the leading all-you-can-read ebook library for kids 12 and under. And I have to tell you, I love the service. I love what you can find there, too. And they offer unlimited access to over 20,000 high-quality children's books, including thousands of read-to-me audiobooks and educational videos. Epic's award-winning service includes a wide variety of fiction and nonfiction books from leading publishers such as Scholastic, National Geographic, HarperCollins, Macmillan, and many, many more. With over 20,000 books available now and many titles being added each week, Epic has been called the Netflix of kids' books. It's an unlimited library your kids can take with them anywhere they go. Well-known book series including Fancy Nancy, Flat Stanley, Rainbow Magic Fairies, The Chronicles of Narnia, Ramona, Batman, Goosebumps, Clifford, A Series of Unfortunate Events, and the books that my kids loved when they were growing up, Tommy DePaula's A Clown of God. The Epic Library contains everything from picture books to chapter books, early readers, audiobooks, read-to-me audiobooks, comic books, graphic novels, nonfiction titles, educational books, junior novels, and they have titles in Spanish and Mandarin Chinese. You can get it all for one low price. Unlimited access, 20,000 books anywhere in the world. But listen, it is a great service, but I'm going to make it even better. You can try Epic, not just for 1 month, for 2 months. Go to readingwithyourkids.com, click on the Epic banner, and then enter the promo code JEDLIE, 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 in the little space where it asked for it, and you can get your second month of Epic for free. Try it for free for 2 months. Readingwithyourkids.com, click on the banner, promo code JEDLIE, Jedlie, 2 months of Epic for free. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is also brought to you by my brand new school assembly program. That's right. I present educational magic shows at schools, libraries, churches, and special events all around the country. And I have a brand new show. It's called Discover Your World, One Book at a Time. In this all-new, totally interactive program, I use storytelling, comedy, magic, illusion to get kids excited about books and to get them excited to read on their own. Hey, you can find out all about it at my website, jedlie.com, Jedlie.com. We also have a link at the readingwithyourkids.com website. Joining us on the line right now from one of my favorite cities in the world, beautiful Atlanta, Georgia. He is the author of a great new book called My Name is Wonder. Please welcome to the show, Ronald Chapman. Ronald, how are you?
I am doing well, Jed. I'm tickled to be with you.
How's the weather down in Atlanta? It's freezing and it's snowing here in Boston.
Well, over the weekend we were supposed to get a bunch of stuff, but nothing showed up. But they did shut the city down in great Southern fashion.
Yes, and it's actually pretty good. We were down. Not in Atlanta during a snowstorm. I've been down in Northern Virginia during a couple, and they do kind of shut things down early, if there's a dusting. But we're down there one day when they didn't take the warning seriously, and they said, well, we've shut down too many times. And so they left everything open, and they were hit with about 8 inches of snow. And boy, those poor people down there had no idea what to do.
Yeah, well, I was in Boston once, when 24, 25 inches some years ago. And if that stuff hit Atlanta, Georgia, it would just be chaos for weeks. So, just don't know how to handle it.
Now, Ronald is a fascinating person. He is he's an author, obviously, but he's also a speaker, and he does a lot of work with forgiveness and does a lot of work with the folks at the CDC. So you're really kind of like a Renaissance man.
Well, some people have said that. I think the honest truth, Jed, is I can't ignore something that grabs my attention. And the more intriguing it is, the more hooked I am. So I've been known to go in some rather challenging directions. But yeah, I mean, kind of like what I understand about you. It's there's a lot of fun stuff to get involved in, including books.
Yep. That's what I keep telling my wife is if I see something that I'm interested in, I just go for it. And she turns around and says, you just can't keep a job. But anyways, So tell us a little bit about My Name is Wonder.
Sure. Well, just a quick little backstory.
Sure.
I take writing vacations, and I was in Victoria, British Columbia some years back, and I was out in a park, and in the middle of the park, they have a petting zoo, and in the petting zoo are goats, and I love goats. Mm-hmm. So I was hanging out with them, and in the middle of that, whatever that spiritual experience was with the goats, a flock of crows showed up and just made a racket. And I just had the time of my life. Love crows too, and so I put my backpack on and took off after I was done with them, and literally halfway across the park, Jed, this story downloaded out of nowhere. I mean, just bam, there it was, and I found a coffee shop and hammered out the outline, and that became My Name is Wonder, which is the story of a goat named Wonder, who's a curious, adventuresome goat on a spiritual trek, quest, with his spirit guide, Matt Crack Crow, who's a shape-shifting, coyote-like, wily figure who has great wisdom, but you're not always sure whether it's wisdom or insanity that he's channeling. So they go on a great trek that, actually two great treks that are, essentially, it's a parable for teaching about spiritual principles.
Cool. It sounds fascinating. I love that whole idea, that character, that guy that's, kind of bordering on genius or insanity. A lot of folks in the world seem to be, towing that line.
Well, sure. I mean, the craziest thing about wisdom, and in so many great traditions, a lot of the mystics in the Catholic tradition, I mean, you really have to look at them sometimes, Jed, and try and decide. It's like, is this dude channeling the Holy Spirit, or is this dude a crackpot? Because they do some strange stuff, and of course many of them do miracles, and so perhaps the line between, wisdom and deep spirituality and insanity is a fine one, perhaps.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm sure a lot of people looked at Francis a little odd when he was preaching the gospel to the animals in the forest. Yeah. So this sounds like a great experience. One of the things that I really encourage parents to do is to read with their kids. And whether it's, and when I say that, I think a lot of people think, oh yeah, I read with my 2-year-old. Now he can, he can read by himself. He's 5, so I don't have to do it anymore. And it's like, no. You have to do it forever. And it's not like you have to do it forever. It's just a blessing. I mean, it really is a great thing to do with your kids, whether they're 2 or 5 or 15 or 50, just to experience a story, a journey together. It's just a great just a great launching point for all these wonderful conversations.
Oh, I totally agree with you. To this day, my daughters talk. I mean, we read a number of things, but to this day, and my daughters are now 35 and 33, so long grown, they still talk about the Chronicles of Narnia. Which we read, I mean, it's 9 books, so we read it over quite an extended period. But the part they remember most was when we would go on family vacations in the car, and when my wife and I would switch driving, when I would be on the passenger side, I would read to them from the Chronicles, and it would fill up mile after mile after mile. But something you said has really been my experience. To the degree that we can stimulate meaningful conversation, age appropriate meaningful conversation, books and stories. I mean, my God, they fuel conversation with your kids about the most interesting things because, books got everything in them. And so I see them as this incredibly rich dialogue producing approach that just happens to also be really fun if you find good books.
Yeah. There's so many parents who dread having to have those talks. So at some point I have to talk to my kid about sex, or I have to talk to them about drugs. And it's like all those issues, you can start those conversations when the kids are 4 or 5 years old. Obviously, you're not going to talk about drugs, don't take street drugs when they're 4 or 5 years old, but the values that we want to instill in our kids and the decision-making skills that we want them to have, we start talking to them when they're 5 and 6 and 7 years old.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm going to stretch that even a little bit further, Jed. There's since I do work with the Centers for Disease Control, I'm familiar with some of the data that's coming out about the stimulation of good vital brains. And, there are programs like Read to Me Baby, where they encourage you to start building your child's vocabulary, because the linguistic acquisition of children, man, the more words, the more ideas, the more vivid imagery we can give them just as early as possible stimulates brain development and development more broadly. But then the cool part is, just as you said, I mean, some of these books, they put the most interesting topics in a safe way on the table, things that you can begin to talk about just by, asking your kid. It's like, what'd you think of that? And that's the basis for really good, healthy relationships that lay the foundation for talking about really difficult stuff at some future date.
Yeah. I think one thing that might scare parents into asking that question, what do you think about that, is that they kind of know deep inside of them that if they ask their kid, if they ask the kid to give them their opinion, then they kind of have to accept that's their opinion. If they give an opinion that doesn't kind of line up with their parents, you can tell them that, but you can't tell them they're wrong. You're wrong. You don't think that way. It's like, no, Mom, I do.
Yeah, but something you said that is, the earlier you start.
Yep.
Right? The earlier that you get those conversations going, I'm not talking about sexual intercourse with a 3-year-old. I'm talking about that whole basis for interaction, so that you're talking about these interesting subjects. You're finding out what your kid's thinking about or not thinking about. And then what happens is, we know this from our adult conversations. You start up a conversation with the woman to become your wife or whatever. And, a year later, you're having these deep conversations that you couldn't get to without having had those formative conversations. So, it really brings the conversation along to start early. And, I know parents shy away from this, but I'm a social worker by education, a master's in social work. And, what I know today is and I wish it had come out of some great wisdom on my part, Jed. I stumbled into it, but I decided I would just talk openly to the girls, Natalie and Brianne, about stuff. And what stunned me in retrospect is they have much higher capacity for working with stuff than I ever imagined. This whole idea that we have to buffer our children has not been my experience. And what makes that so important to me is I look now at their ability to be good decision makers. And it's all based on the fact that we were able to talk openly about things, which all started very, very early, and books were the fuel.
Yeah. I think that's really the key, is that as parents, one of the things we want to do is to help our kids become great decision makers. We don't want to, they're not computers, so we don't want to try to program them with a response for every occurrence, because we can't anticipate every challenge that they're going to face, but we can give them a great foundation and great values that they can make decisions on.
Yeah, and I'm going to just use a really, really classic example. The conundrums that come up in To Kill a Mockingbird, which I know is a true classic. It is rich with content. Everything about racism, classism, guilt and innocence, principled behavior, non-judgment. And granted, that's not for a little kid, but my goodness, everything that we would care about the ethics and morals of our children are in that one book. That one book has it all in there. I guess everything but sex. And so you kind of go, well, wow. If me and my kid read that book, we would be sharing this incredibly rich cultural dialogue that undoubtedly is going to help our children learn how to navigate these really, really complex issues as they get older. And maybe even the better part is we'll be included in the conversation, which I know is something that many parents worry about, that their kids aren't talking to them.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about some of the conversations that we can have reading My Name is Wonder together.
Yeah. Well, so there's a lot of mysticism in it. So there are things that happen that don't fit. I mean, not Harry Potter-ish, but well, kind of like that, where things happen which cause you to wonder. There's that word.
Yeah.
About things. So for example, there's a mysterious moment where the crow first shows up and intervenes in Wonder's life. And I won't do a plot reveal, but it's a very provocative experience that leaves Wonder wondering, and then precipitates the beginning of the interaction, the conversation, all those sorts of things. And so that's one. There's another which is probably I don't know. It's one of my favorite sections in the book, where Wonder is on his trek and he's lost, and he runs into a bear who appears to be stupid, a bear named Baboso. But it turns out Baboso is a deeply wise bear. And what happens in that interaction, there are a number of teasers in there that cause you to really stop and think. For example, one of his lines is the path is made with every step. And essentially meaning the path doesn't pre-exist. It's made by us taking action, which is this great conversation point for talking with a child about. There are mentor figures in here. There are mean goats that Wonder has to figure out how to navigate. And there's a big theme of disappointment that is woven into what Wonder has to navigate as part of this spiritual quest. And so, in fact, I think probably some of the richest material for story purposes is, in fact, how Wonder has to navigate a series of major disappointments, and ultimately how he manages to handle them, which is, one of my reviewers said that that particular section led him to consider Wonder his new hero. And he said that Wonder was on a noble path. And so there are a number of characters. There's an otter in there. There are all kinds of interesting interactions with coyotes and zoo animals. And so the result is that you get all these interactions. In some ways, it does remind me of Narnia, because Narnia is filled with talking animals, right? And so it works really well because animals are so relatable to children.
Sure.
I suspect that if I were reading Wonder, and by the way, the book is dedicated to Natalie and Brianne, my girls, because of all, I'm going to cry, because of all those wonderful memories about stories that we shared. And so I probably, if I'd had that book in my hands, I probably would have started reading it to them at about the age somewhere between 10 and 12. Which some would say, well, isn't that a little early for spiritual concepts? It's like, well, no, I mean, your kids they're getting loaded with that stuff from as early as going to Sunday school or whatever. So it actually, in the end, Jed, has a rather profound take home for what this thing all adds up to, and I will not do a spoiler on that, but I'll leave it there.
Well, there's so much that you talked about. I mean, using this book to talk to our kids about disappointment. That's so. I just saw a very, very telling video talking about millennials and what's the problem with millennials. And one of the things that this sociologist said was that we're dealing with a generation of kids who grew up who never experienced disappointment. They received a trophy for everything, and they were told they were special for just existing and not doing anything. And as a result, when they get to be adults and they run into the first bit of conflict or disappointment, they fall apart and they don't know what to do. And I definitely think that that's an issue. And so to be able to use a story to talk to our kids about it, talk about a safe way to do it, to prepare them for life, because life is full of disappointments along with joys and happinesses and delaying gratitude. It's, a whole rainbow of experiences. It's just not great things.
Yeah, interesting. Man, you have to remember that long before we had printed word, all wisdom, all spiritual principle, all religion, all philosophy was transferred by oral tradition. People told stories, and they told them over and over again. And then if you shift and fast forward, I mean, that's what movies are. I mean, every kid who went to see, Star Wars, the new one, Rogue One, right? I mean, they're being thrown right smack in the middle of a story about heroism and all the bravery that comes with it and so forth. So, we're like wired for story.
Right.
It's the original teaching tool that we had. So why not take advantage of it? Because the actual act of interacting, so if you're a good storyteller, tell stories without books, but there's an interactive element to reading to our children that is lacking by just passively watching Netflix, although admittedly there's some good stuff on there too.
Sure. If we take advantage of it and actually have a conversation with their kids about what we're watching.
Right.
Yeah.
I flash back now to a funny conversation I had with my younger daughter, Brianne, when we watched, she was older, I think she was 16, 17, 18, and we were watching Braveheart, Mel Gibson flick, which is, I mean, it's a pretty violent movie. But it's driven by the call of freedom, right? I mean, which is a universal principle that we all seem to agree with. And I still remember to this day the conversation with her about what was going on in that movie, about what it meant and how she was experiencing it. I didn't handle it all well, but I still remember the conversation. So, all of that gives us the opportunity to interact with our children. And frankly, the evidence would seem that, given that so many of us don't have table conversation anymore, because most of us don't sit down at a dinner table very often, perhaps talking about books, reading books together, maybe that's a good strategy for interaction that is much more available to us than we imagine.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. One of the things, it was a great experience that I had. I happened to be taking a class on media literacy. And I kind of didn't know what it was going into it. My daughter, I think, was in 7th or 8th grade. And one of the first things that we heard in the class was, don't try to ban anything. Be open to talking about any kind of media. Talk with your kids about it. You can experience, you can learn from anything. And right at the same time, all the trailers for, I can't even think of the name of that dumb MTV show. It was something like Jersey Shore. Jersey Shore was coming out. And my first reaction was, no way is my kid, and my Alejandro came to me, I got to see that show. And I go, let's see if we can put this stuff into action. And we sat down and watched it together. Yep. And admittedly, I laughed at some inappropriate behavior. And at the end of the show, I sat down and go, so what do you think, Alejandra? And she's like, wow, it's funny. And he did this and this. I goes, but what about Snooki? What do you think about Snooki? And how do you think she feels about herself? Oh, she has no self-respect. If she did, she wouldn't do this and this and this. And I go, hey, there's something to this. I didn't have to lecture her. And it was just, you're absolutely right. And and from that point on, we watched it together. We talked about it. There was nothing scary about it. There were lots of scary behavior, but when my daughter was able to sit down and go, yeah, that's I would never do that because A, B, C, and D. It was just, wow. And the same thing with books, even more, because it's, you're not talking about a 30-minute experience. You're talking about, a book that you experience over 10 days or a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and right with you on that. I think of all the instances now, just as you were saying, I was scrolling back over all those instances where dark stories became the basis for learning life lessons. I know we like to shield our children from those things, but at the same time, and shield others, but at the same time, you can't pull the ugly out of life. It's part and parcel of life, whether you look at that as horrific stuff or whether you look at that as just the disappointments of life where things don't go right. Dogs get run over by cars. We should talk about that. And so all these things that show up in story, give us the basis for the full range of talking about human experience. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the best preparation for our kids, so they're not walking out, any more ignorant than is inevitable that they have to learn by their own path.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other things you said that My Name is Wonder. It's a great catalyst to start talking about spirituality.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, really important. I had a conversation not too long ago with a mom at the elementary, the parish, the Catholic school that my kids went to. And, both of my kids were kind of high profile. My daughter was in all the school plays and being a performer, and, have a fairly high profile. So I was talking to this mom who has a daughter that's a number of years younger than my kids.
Yeah.
And she's getting ready to go to college. And she's really nervous because she goes, my kids, I'm really afraid that they're going to leave and start questioning their faith. Mm. And I turned to her and I said, well, that's wonderful. They should question their faith. And you should be there to talk about it with them, because if your faith can't stand up to a little bit of questioning and discovery and exploration, then maybe it shouldn't be your faith.
Oh, totally. I am totally with you on that. I think of all, because I do a fair amount of work in spiritual communities of many kinds, and over and over again, exactly what you say. If there isn't some flexibility and some movement in what we come to believe. I was actually talking with a guy years ago in a cafe in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And he said, God, I remember it. We were eating enchiladas, and he said, Ron, it is true. It's got to be a personal relationship. That means it's got to be your personal relationship. And what he meant by that, as we talked it out, was, as much as I might admire your belief system, Jed, I can't adopt your belief system. Mm-hmm. I can't actually adopt the belief system of any church, faith, religion. Because in the end, it has to become personal. Mm-hmm. So that means it's got to be me wrestling this stuff down for myself and coming to some kind of a reconciliation. And while I know kids don't have the sophistication to work a lot of the kinks out in that, once again, talking about this stuff, and My Name is Wonder is chock full of spiritual propositions, some of which are probably pretty heretical, but to engage it. And of course, every now and then your kid will say something. I still remember a couple of occasions where Natalie, especially, we were watching a politician on TV one day, and I mean, she was only, 13 years old. Mm-hmm. And this politician was doing what they do on TV, and she turns to me and she says, "Did you ever notice that her eyes don't match her words?" Ooh. And I said, "Whoa. Oh, wow." She goes, "Yeah, she's lying." Uh-huh. And I thought, okay, so this is great wisdom kind of coming out of the observation of, because the 13-year-old's paying attention in ways that I'm just, perhaps cynical or blocked off from. And so, there are things that have come out of those kinds of conversations that have advanced my thinking about what this whole God proposition is, and especially how I intend to live my life with regard to it. So the more we can, it's almost like, we know that today that letting your kids being exposed to germs builds a strong immune system. Mm-hmm. So too with a strong faith, a strong set of morals and ethics, is let's expose them to a lot of things, and trust that they will figure it out as we give them guidance over time.
Absolutely. Well, I have had such a wonderful time speaking to you. It's just been a pleasure.
That was fast, Jed.
I know. We've been speaking for over half an hour. It's like, look at that. Well, that's what happens when, people get together and they have a great conversation. Yeah. And that's what we've been talking about. You can sit down and read with your kids, and you start. You like Ron was saying, he's reading to his kids in the car as they're driving, and so you can start a conversation in Atlanta, and then all of a sudden be down in Orlando. And
that's right.
How did all those miles go by? And so definitely want to check out My Name is Wonder. I know it's available on Amazon. Is it available in bookstores?
Yeah, it's in the mainstream bookstores. And I love local bookstores. So if you check out your local bookstore, that's best. But if you're an Amazon kind of person or Barnes and Noble, that's great too. It's in full distribution.
Right, and it's Terra Nova Publishing. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Right. And if folks want to learn a little bit more about Ronald Chapman, is there a website for them to check out?
Sure enough, I actually have two that I'll pass along.
Okay.
One, if you just want to know more about me, it's ronaldchapman.com.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to know more about a lot of these ideas, I have a site called Seeing True, SEEINGTRUE.com, where I put forth a lot of blogs, a lot of videos, a lot of audio content, mostly philosophical, spiritual, provocative sort of material that seems like it needs to be said and put into the world. So happy to have people follow me there as well.
Great, great. Well, Ronald Chapman, I want to thank you for creating My Name is Wonder, and for creating your websites, and absolutely for spending time with us today. It has been a pleasure.
It absolutely was. I love your conversation style. Thanks for making space for me.
Hey, I wanted to let you know the schedule that we're anticipating here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We anticipate putting out a new episode every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. This Thursday, we have a brand new episode coming out. Features one of my favorite people in the entire world, a fantastic author. His name is Jeffrey McSkimming. He's the author of two really wonderful series of books. One is the Cairo Gym series, and the second is the Phyllis Wong series. And you're going to just love finding out about these great books. Jeffrey has this great talent with words and with language. It really is. It's kind of like watching the language dance on the page. It's wonderful. You're going to love his books. You're going to love meeting Jeffrey too. Hey, I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, my buddy Ronald Chapman, and most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time with us to be with us today, and thank you so much for taking the time to read with your beautiful kids. My name's Jedley. We'll see you on the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.